Well, let's talk about the auto industry because GM CEO Mary Barra is calling her meeting with President Trump, quote, productive and valuable. Barra met with Trump following the president's criticism of the automaker and suggested that it should move operations back to the U.S. from China. And we know that Trump and Barra have spoken many times on the phone. He has often tweeted about his most recent call with Mary Barra, but now they have met in person. Rick Newman, our car guy, joins us now with more. Rick, tell me about the Barra-Trump relationship. It was funny, in our tease, I said, oh, we'll have the details. Well, we really don't have many details.
I said, what details?
We don't have any details. We just know she says it was productive. I mean, what's she going to say?
She said that as she was getting into her car outside the White House, and what she might have wanted to say was, I can't wait till we get rid of this guy. But that is not what she said. She said it's productive and valuable. She's a very careful speaker. What's going on here? I mean, Trump has been pretty critical of the automakers. He wants all the automakers to have more jobs in the United States. He wants them to move production back from Mexico. He has criticized General Motors for building products in China. He says they should build them here in the United States instead. He's off base on some of these things. I mean, most of GM actually has a very profitable business in China. They've been one of the American companies that has made really great inroads there. And almost all the vehicles they produce in China, they sell in China. There's one vehicle, the Buick Envision, which is an SUV or a crossover that they actually import to the United States from China. But the reason they make it over there is Buick is big in China, and they sell that car in China. So they're making it for the Chinese market and then bringing it back here. It's pretty hard to build cars in the United States and then export them to China.
I was just about to ask about that. I imagine that
it's hard to do
costly.
because labor costs here are so much more expensive. Now, believe it or not, the two companies that do that actually export cars from U.S. to China are BMW and Mercedes, because to them, the U.S. is a lower cost place. Those plants are down in the South, and it costs less to build cars there than it does in Europe. But at any rate, there's a lot going on here. And one of the things that Trump probably wanted to talk to GM about is he's trying to lower the fuel economy standards for vehicles, and he's actually meeting resistance from the car companies themselves. And the reason this is happening is that California has been allowed for some time to set its own fuel economy standards, which are generally higher, or they have been higher than the national standards. And the reason for that is that goes back to the smog and pollution problem in Los Angeles. I mean, they had to get tough with car pollution. So under Obama, Obama raised the fuel economy standards to very high levels that were hard to meet and harmonized them with California. So at least there was one set of standards. I mean, car companies don't want to have to build two sets of cars. One for the California standard, which is actually, there are 12 states that follow the California standard, including New York, where we are. And then it's a different set of cars. They want to build one set of cars for one standard. And with Trump lowering the standard, but California not lowering the standard, we're getting toward two sets of standards. So Trump is kind of pissed off that car companies are like, hey, we really don't want you to lower fuel economy this much. Why didn't you ask us about this?
Because we already adjusted.
That's right.
Just really quickly back up to GM and Mary Barra. So how realistic is it that they will move some production back to the U.S., or will they just do something to sort of pacify President Trump in the meantime until he attacks them next time?
It's both of those things. General Motors is not going to move production from China to the United States. And the reason is almost all that production is for China. So that's not going to happen. What the car companies have been doing, Ford is one example. They have actually moved a little bit of production from Mexico back to the United States. The problem is that American labor costs are sufficiently high that automakers cannot turn a profit on smaller vehicles with smaller profit, that are lower cost, lower price cars at smaller profit margins if they make them in the United States. They just cannot pay the labor costs here in the United States and make a profit on those cars. So what they've been doing is putting production of their highest profit margin vehicles, which is pickups and crossovers, here in the United States, and then trying to build those other cars someplace else. Mexico is where a lot of small cars are made, for example. So, Trump just keeps pressing them to, and I think what they're doing is they're doing what they can to concentrate production of the higher margin vehicles here in the United States. But, Ford is getting out of the business of selling passenger cars because they just cannot make money doing it. So you can't really a president cannot say, you must build this stuff here at a loss.
Yeah.
No company is going to go along with that.
Right. And Rick, you mentioned California and the emission standards, and we do have some breaking news that just came out minutes ago. Now, the Justice Department has launched an antitrust investigation into 4 automakers that forged independent agreements with California on those vehicle emission standards. That is according to the Wall Street Journal, citing sources. Now, the Journal reports that Justice Department lawyers are seeking to determine whether Ford, Honda, BMW, and VW violated federal competition laws by agreeing with each other to follow tailpipe emissions standards beyond those proposed by the Trump administration. So, Rick, this is what you were just discussing,
that's right.
the inconsistencies nationwide with state-by-state emissions standards.
So this is brand new breaking news as we were sitting here. My first reaction is this is very dubious. Because they're not colluding with each other by agreeing to a set of standards imposed on them by a state. So that's what's going on. They're not getting together and saying, let's fix the market somehow by agreeing to the set of standards. What they're doing is they're getting together with the state of California and, by extension, 12 other states and saying, we're going to abide by your standards, which are higher than federal standards. This is a very weird situation. I mean, this sounds...
Why would complying with something be...
I was just about to say, if California has higher standards and they are making cars to abide by those higher standards, why does it matter if other states have lower standards? You've exceeded them, so what's the issue?
That's what I'm getting at. I don't know. But what the issue is, Trump is pissed off. That's the issue. So this feels very politically motivated, and you have to back up. I mean, it's the usual sort of funhouse situation in the Trump administration. Why is Trump trying to cut fuel economy standards lower than the industry itself wants? I mean, it's just because that's what he came into office thinking that everybody wanted. So
deregulate.
That's right. Just cut this. If Obama did it, it's bad.
Yep.
I mean, I will say Obama did set very high standards, and some people thought they were unattainable. In other words, he said, you guys have to meet mileage standards, even though the technology doesn't exist to meet those mileage standards.
But then didn't the automakers begin to comply and meet them?
They did, and one of the things that was supposed to happen, Obama actually cheated a little bit. One of the things that was supposed to happen under Obama was, okay, the industry agreed to these very high standards, but there were these review points where they would say, have we developed the technology to actually meet these standards? And if the automakers could make a case that, no, the technology has not materialized yet, then the standards would actually, there was a mechanism for actually reducing the standard. And by the way, this has a lot to do with electric vehicles. So electric vehicles, when you build some electric vehicles, you get credit. It really pushes up the credits that you get for meeting the high efficiency standards. The problem is, people have to buy those vehicles.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean,
you need people to buy them.
And we know that the range. So you got to get the range up. You got to make them affordable and stuff like that. And if so you can't force people to buy these cars. And if you can't force people to buy the electrics, you can't meet the standards.
Right.